And so people were doing what, everything they could to try to douse the flames and try to keep them away?
Yeah. We were bucketing, we had hoses out. But the helicopters, they arrived and with monsoon buckets, and they did a fantastic job.
How close did the fire come?
Very close. I mean, the septic tank, which is 10 metres away from the house, that's all gone. No, very close. And then it actually whipped round to the back.
Connecticut. Officials are evacuating cities downstream from the dam, an area probably about 60 or 70 miles to the south.
So there are, thousands of homes, of businesses now under threat as a result of this dam and this spillway that are being undermined?
Correct. And most of the area, it's a largely rural area, largely agricultural zone. It's considered among the world's most fertile farmland. There are no large population centers in the immediate path of any water that comes out, but there certainly are people that will be impacted if something bad should occur.
Mark, is it clear how exactly this dam and this spillway came to be in this condition, to be so undermined?
Officials are pretty tight-lipped, and they've been saying, at first they were saying that damage to spillways is fairly typical for dams, that they're used to making repairs, but environmentalists and other groups had raised issues about the maintenance of the dam, as well as the fact that the codes have been updated and the unlined emergency spillway, apparently, according to some lawsuit, was not proper and didn't meet the current codes, and they were seeking the people who depend on this dam have to pay for it. That's mainly the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California.
What is it that people are saying to you and have said about how they feel, how safe they feel being in this sort of an area?
Well, there was a lot of disorder, and the facilities where people were sent, the evacuation centers, were not prepared. This is not something that people were anticipated. I'm a reporter working in a news studio. I have a lot of phone numbers. I got to tell you, trying to reach the sheriff in the first few hours was impossible. The Department of Water Resources, every number, every contact that I was trying to make, I was hitting busy signals, and I can't imagine the panic that people were feeling when they're hearing that there's some issue with that dam, because people always think the worst, and they're thinking that that it's going to be like a disaster movie, and not that, officials have been saying over and over again that there's no risk to the actual dam structure, and they've been very clear about that, but they also didn't anticipate that the emergency structure would fail within 24 hours. I guess the biggest issue going forward is we have storms coming in, and those storms are going to add to the pressure on the dam as the rivers drain the mountains and drain into that lake. And officials are really trying to dump as much water as possible from the lake without causing further damage in order to make room for the water that's going to be coming down the mountains over the next week.
That's Mark Albert, a reporter with North State Public Radio. It's 7:27.
Staying in America, but to Washington now, where Donald Trump is meeting his Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau. The first time the two have met in Washington is Simon Marks. Good morning to you, Simon. They're chalk and cheese, these two.
They are indeed. Justin Trudeau bravely wandering into the Oval Office, even as he's under fire up in Canada for having reached out so quickly to try and begin conversations with Donald Trump about the renegotiation of some crucial provisions within NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. We've just had an email from the White House that says that Prime Minister Trudeau gifted President Trump a photo of Donald Trump and his father, Pierre Trudeau, former Prime Minister of Canada, when they met at an event in New York City in November 1980. Security advisor. I think it is fair to say that outside the White House, perhaps even outside the Oval Office, there are very few people in this city who believe that he is fit to serve in the American government. He has trafficked in conspiracy theories online. We now know that he engaged in discussions with the Russian ambassador that touched on the issue of when President Trump might think about diluting sanctions against Russia before Donald Trump became president. That, on paper, would seem to break at least one law. He's subject to FBI investigation, and yet, for the moment at least, Donald Trump seems to be sticking by him. There are all sorts of questions here about why that may be occurring, questions that are very similar to those we ask about why Donald Trump is so beguiled by Vladimir Putin.
Yes, and also if it was somehow sanctioned by Trump, because if I understand it correctly, it's not legal for a citizen, and remember they weren't sworn in at this point, to conduct relations on behalf of a country, right? That's what's at the issue here. And yet if there was some communication between the two men, then perhaps throwing him under the bus might mean you're the next one to go.
But clearly the fact that Michael Flynn lied to the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, about the nature of his telephone calls with the Russian ambassador has caused Michael Flynn a great degree of difficulty, including two very angry telephone calls on Friday with the Vice President, who is said to be furious that he went public giving his support for Michael Flynn after Michael Flynn had misled him about the nature of the phone calls that he had with the Russian ambassador. Look, these questions about the nature of the relationships between senior figures within the Trump administration and the Russian government just are not going away. And at the moment, the Michael Flynn issue is ground zero for those conversations.
And where are we? Week 3, is it?
Just got into week 4, Kyle.
Okay,
Seems like only yesterday.
Thank you very much, Simon. Simon Marks, 29 to 8.
Coming up before 8 o'clock on Morning Report, we'll be talking about the housing shortage in Auckland and the government's plan to build big in Avondale and in Mount Roskill. Also, Andrew Little, the Labour leader, will be with us too. We'll be getting his response to that. And also, an outspoken New Plymouth councillor is at the centre of a backlash over a Facebook post in which he says Te Reo Māori is, quote, being kept alive on a respirator. Let's get the headlines now with Nicola Wright.
2 fires are burning on Christchurch's Port Hills. One is near Dyers Pass and Summit Roads, and the other has destroyed a house at Early Valley Road near Taitapu. Other homes are under threat. The fire service says 11 helicopters and 6 fire trucks are working on that this morning. In Hawke's Bay, 5 fires south of Hastings are largely under control. In the worst of them, 2 houses were destroyed and more than 50 people evacuated when 50 hectares of dry grass and pasture burned in the Tukituki Valley, south of Havelock North. A faulty fluorescent light sparked a fire that gutted a Rotorua church last week. The fire service's Hamish Smith says it's the 3rd fire of its kind in the Rotorua Taupō area in the past 5 years. A minister at St John's Presbyterian Church, Lance Thomas, told Morning Report he's relieved the fire wasn't deliberately lit. Nearly 200,000 people in Northern California have had to evacuate after 2 overflow channels at the US's tallest dam were found to be damaged. The 230-metre-high Oroville Dam itself is not at risk of collapsing, but officials say its emergency spillway is close to caving in. It's the first time that Lake Oroville, which is about 100 kilometres north of Sacramento, has experienced such an emergency in the dam's near 50-year history. At least 11 people have been killed and more than 70 injured in a bomb attack in the Pakistani city of Lahore. It happened as hundreds of people gathered in the street to protest about new rules governing the sale of pharmaceuticals. A faction of the Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack. 14 buildings in Palmerston North will receive in-depth earthquake checks because of questions raised about a local engineering firm's designs. The council has compiled a list of 148 buildings in which the firm Kevin O'Connor and Associates had a hand. A council manager, Peter Ethorn, says he's confident the buildings are sound. That's the news. Today's weather with Met Service. Kaitaia has some rain from afternoon and a high of 25. Whangarei some rain from afternoon, 28. Auckland occasional rain, easing this evening, 22. Hamilton rain might be heavy, easing to showers in the afternoon, 21. Tauranga and Whakatane rain at times, easing this evening, 23 degrees. Rotorua occasional rain easing in the evening and 20. Gisborne high cloud, chance of a spot of rain, 29. Napier and Hastings high cloud may get a little rain today, 25. Taupō rain could be heavy, easing to showers this afternoon, 20. Taumarunui rain eases to showers this afternoon and 21. New Plymouth showers clearing this evening to fine spells and 21. Whanganui cloud and a few afternoon showers, then fine, 23 degrees. Palmerston North has a few afternoon showers, then fine, 22. Masterton fine with high cloud at times, 24. Levin, Carpety and Wellington a few showers. They clear this afternoon to some fine weather, 20 degrees all round. Blenheim chance of a morning shower, then sunny and 24. Nelson, brief morning shower, then fine, 22. Westport rain eases to showers this morning, then clears, 18. Greymouth and Hokitika showers clear in the afternoon to long fine breaks, 16. Kaikoura mostly fine, 25. Christchurch mostly sunny, 24. Ashburton cloud and the chance of a shower, 22. Timaru cloudy, might get a shower, 23. Oamaru early showers, then mostly sunny and 18 degrees. Wanaka, Queenstown, Alexandra and Dunedin, early rain and then mostly fine. Wanaka and Dunedin have highs of 18, 16 for Queenstown, 19 in Alexandra. Invercargill showers, some of them heavy, and 14 degrees. It's 25 to 8.
And this is Morning Report. The government is voting using vacant Crown land in Avondale and Mount Roskill in Auckland to meet the challenge of building tens of thousands of new homes there. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says that an influx of foreign labour is likely to be needed because of the scale of the work involved here. The Building and Construction Minister is Nick Smith. He's with us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Guy.
Can you tell us about what plans there are for new developments in Auckland and what they would be? Are we talking about state homes here?
Well, what the Prime Minister pointed out yesterday is that with the High Court yesterday confirming the Auckland Unitary Plan and dismissing the appeals, there is the capacity for far greater amounts of housing in Auckland. If we take Housing New Zealand's estate in Auckland right now, there are 27,000 homes. The old rules would only allow that to be expanded on those land holdings to 30,000. Now, with the Unitary Plan confirmed, it enables that number to go from 27,000 to 69,000 homes. Now, the Prime Minister made plain that that is the potential, and Housing New Zealand is systematically working through where there are opportunities to be able to proceed. So obviously you've got big developments occurring at places like Hobsonville, like Tamaki, like Northcote, and there are other areas of the sort you mentioned where there is the potential to take up that opportunity.
Okay, so that's roughly 40-odd thousand new houses if we take it from 27 to 69, give or take a few thousand.
And it's important just because there's that capacity, it doesn't automatically mean that it's taken up. In exactly the same way is that the Auckland Unitary Plan across the city provides for an additional 420,000 homes, but not every one of those property owners who owns, for instance, a bungalow has now got the opportunity to develop that into apartments or townhouses. Not everybody will take that opportunity up. There'll be lots of other factors that affect.
Okay, so to what extent then is the state the major player here, or are you going to rely on people deciding to subdivide their property?
Both. So if we look at the growth that's occurred in building consents, 5 years ago we were building 13,000 homes a year. We're now building 30,000. So nationally? That's nationally, compound growth. In Auckland, we've gone from 4,000 a year to 10,000 a year. Now, last year, calendar year 2016, the government, through its agencies like Housing New Zealand, built more houses, but over 1,000, than any year in 25 years. Okay. We've got programmed for about an additional 10,000 between now and 2020 on those government land holdings. But the most important part of the supply curve is going to be the private sector, and that continues to grow very strongly.
Okay, let's talk about the national shortage and then the Auckland shortage. Bill English said yesterday that nationally the shortage is between 10 and 20,000. Where does that figure come from?
Well, there's a number of estimates. There's been some data about some numbers that were produced by the RNZ Bank. There's been numbers that have been produced by MB and by Treasury. It's a very difficult number to estimate.
And where did the Prime Minister get his number from?
Well, that was what the advice that I've had from my own officials within the Ministry of Business
Innovation. So that's what you believe, that the national shortage, we're only 10 to 20,000 short?
Look, I really want to make this point strongly, and that is any estimate in this space is always going to be crude, and that is because the most important number is the assumption made about how many people per household. Now, in New Zealand at the moment, that average is about 2.5, but it does vary.
Okay, well, you say it's crude, but we went through a whole housing accord signed by the government and Auckland Council. In 2012, they said there was a shortage of between 20 and 30,000 homes in Auckland. They said that in that accord that was signed by ministers, and that there was a need for 13,000 new homes every year for 30 years. Now, given you've just acknowledged we aren't building that many in Auckland, it's close to 10,000, so it's short of the 13,000, and we had a shortage of up to 30,000, then how can the national shortage be less than that at 10 to 20,000. It doesn't make sense.
That just re-emphasises the uncertainty. If I give the example of Christchurch...
Who signed the accord?
Well, certainly the government, and that was the Auckland Council's figures, and of course...
And we were 30,000 short there, and now and we haven't been meeting that, have we? We haven't been building 13,000.
When we signed the accord, we were building 4,000 houses a year in Auckland. We're now building 10,000 a year.
3,000 short of what you need, right?
Oh, well, that, of course, that 13,000
That's true, isn't it?
per year, that 13,000 per year is the estimates associated with the Auckland Unitary Plan to 2040, and of course that's going to be highly dependent on population projections.
Yes, but it means that the shortage is getting worse. If you wanted 13 and you're getting 10, the shortage is getting worse. And yet you say that the national shortage is only 10 to 20,000. The numbers just don't add up, Minister.
Well, I just think take the Christchurch example, is that officials predicted that it was going to take us through to 2017 to be able to close the gap on housing there. Actually, the market stabilised 2 years ago, 2 years earlier than predicted, which just reinforces any of these numbers about trying to estimate in a market economy like our own exactly what those movements are is difficult. What we know is that we've got the largest building boom ever. The level of building activity today is 30% higher than the last peak back in 2004, but the government is totally focused on continuing to grow.
Yep. And meantime, in this city in Auckland, it costs 10 times the median household income to buy the median price of 830,000. I mean, I put it to you that this has been a complete and utter failure by your government to allow that to happen.
No, I do not accept that. And if you look at any of the cities in Auckland, in Australia, similar to Sydney or Melbourne, you've had exactly the same sort of...
Well, there are only 3 cities in the world where houses are less affordable than Auckland.
Well, I would put to you that with the lowest interest rates that we've had in 50 years, with the success of the New Zealand economy, Kiwis coming home, has put real pressure on the housing market. But you will not find a period in New Zealand history when there has been a stronger and consistent growth in new home construction as what there has been over the last 5 years.
Can I just finally ask you about the level of influx of foreign workers, if you like, that are going to be needed to build these homes? How significant is it going to be?
Well, I expect it to be similar to Christchurch, and that is the workforce that we currently have in the building sector is at an all-time high of 243,000 across our country. Some of that growth will be met by people returning to the building industry. Some of it will be met by those that are newly trained, and we've got 10,000, the highest ever, with the building construction ITO, as well as that contribution from overseas workers, of which is predominantly currently coming from Australia, often previous Kiwis that are returning to support that construction boom.
Nick Smith, Building and Construction Minister, thanks for your time. 7 to 8.
And with us now in the Wellington studio, the Labour Party leader Andrew Little. Good morning.
Good morning.
Also to say you can watch this interview. We're streaming it live on the Morning Report Facebook page. Now, let's just pick up on that last point that Nick Smith was talking about there with Guyan. Foreign workers coming in, more of them to support this building boom. Is that something you'd support?
We know that to get the level and quantity of building needed to build the extra houses to accommodate, whether it's in Auckland or in other parts of the country, we're going to have people coming from overseas to help out. It's not a reason to say we don't also invest in training and skilling New Zealanders to enter the construction trades and be part of that as well. Our Kiwi Build program has a 3-year kind of ramp-up period for that, but it will be a mix of training our own and people coming in from overseas.
What proportion would you be comfortable with, though, of foreign workers coming in to support this?
Haven't thought through the detail of proportions or figures. We want to see a significant investment in training up New Zealanders, and that goes hand in hand with another policy of ours, which is giving professional and good careers advice to students at high school, so they're making good decisions about their career opportunities. But fully accept that to get the quantity and level of building, we're going to have people coming from overseas to help out.
What sort of visas would you be happy to see people coming in on? For example, the sort of ones that mean it could count towards them ultimately getting residency, permanent residency or citizenship?
Which is what we did with the Christchurch rebuild. So a lot of people come in from offshore to do that. And what was meant to happen in Christchurch too, there was money set aside, $50 million, I think 48 was the precise figure, to train New Zealanders, very little of it was used. But in any event, people came in from overseas to help out, and as they spent time here, they qualified also to apply for permanent residency. I think that's a perfectly acceptable option to take.
So you'd be happy for that to be part of the migration stats?
For sure, yes. I mean, we've always said the issue about immigration is matching skills needs or the skills of people to what we need in New Zealand, and we've always been dependent on that. That doesn't change. You have a massive house building program over a 10-year period. We're going to have people come from overseas to do that. Some will want to stay here. That's a good thing.
Okay. Just talking a little bit about the quantities of the houses, it seems that there's quite a lot of disagreement about exactly how many houses are needed. From your point of view, I guess you think the state should be shouldering a lot more of this than the private sector. But in terms of affordability, where does that lie? What proportion do you think should be affordable homes?
Well, I think that the state should take responsibility for ensuring that more affordable homes are built. I think it's not about the state kind of picking up the tab. It is about the state working with private developers, working with councils, working with whoever, landowners and the like, to make sure that we have a house building program focused on affordable housing and if necessary to take the regulatory steps that are needed. That's why part of our policy package is an affordable housing authority that has some powers working with others to get the building actually done. This sort of response by the government, which is to sort of play down the figures and then to say no figures are reliable and then to say it's the Auckland Council's fault and we need the unitary plan to do this, that and the other. I think it just shows a total lack of leadership. What we do need is a commitment. The government is going to provide a leadership role with their regulatory powers to do that, a bit of upfront investment that is recovered from the sale of future built houses.
In Auckland, in the areas that this is particularly pointed towards, what do you think the price should be of an affordable house?
Well, our KiwiBuild policy assumes an affordable housing level for Auckland at between $500,000 and $600,000. That reflects the cost of land, but we think we can get the price down by committing to a program of building at scale over a period of time and working with building material suppliers to get discounts on, they know they've got a 10-year supply contract, then we can drive cost out of the project.
And would that then bring the house prices down in Auckland?
Well, it means that the new houses and houses pitched at first home buyers coming on the market will be less than the average price now. That doesn't mean to say that, houses selling at whatever they're selling at now, those prices come down, but it does mean that there's a new bunch of affordable homes pitched at first home buyers with all the conditions attached to it that people can then get into and have a place they can call their own. Would
you then be against the idea of bringing down the house prices in Auckland?
Well, I don't know what you do to do that. It's not a policy objective that we have, and I'm not quite sure what mechanism you think you could use to drive prices down.
Well, I mean, the Green Party's talked about this quite openly. Matiria Ture last year on the programme was saying that she would like to see them fall and had various ideas around that. I mean, is that something that Labour would consider looking at?
No, it's not what we're looking at. I recall the interview. What I don't recall hearing is the actual mechanisms used to achieve that. And I know there are some economists who say, yes, that's what we need to do. But again, I haven't heard an economist specifying what device you would do to use that. What is the most important thing right now is the whole bunch of people, young couples who can't afford to buy their first home. We've got to build houses, affordable homes that they can afford to buy, that they can get into their first home. That's the critical thing. It's about building the houses, not worrying about the prices, which frankly are beyond a government's control.
Thank you very much for your time. The Labour Party leader Andrew Little there in our Wellington studio this morning. It's now 12 minutes to 8.
An outspoken New Plymouth councillor is at the centre of a backlash over a Facebook post in which he says Te Reo Māori is being kept alive on a respirator. In a post discussing compulsory Te Reo Māori in schools, Murray Chong asks how passionate New Zealand really is about saving the language and whether it's time to call it a day. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
In his